The galaxy had rules. Some were spoken, most were not. And one unspoken rule was simple: strong species hunt weak ones. The Carvax Dominion had followed that rule for millennia. They didn't conquer worlds to rule them. They hunted worlds to break them. Fear was their food. Panic was their reward. Their fleets moved quietly between stars, black ships shaped like blades, silent and deadly. Every new system they entered was tested. If a species screamed, begged, or scattered, the Carvax marked them as prey. And that was how they found Earth. At first, the Carvax scouts were confused. Earth was loud, incredibly loud. Radio signals flooded space like noise from a broken machine. Lights blazed across the dark side of the planet. And the creatures on it, the humans, they argued, joked, sang, and fought each other openly. There was no unity. No early warning system for space predators. The scouts watched for weeks, their reports filled with a mix of confusion and amusement. Humans had no natural armor, no claws, no psychic shields. Their weapons were slow, their ships were weak, and their planet was full of soft land and open skies. It was perfect. The Carvax Council approved Earth as a hunt world. They didn't announce an invasion. They didn't declare war. War meant organized resistance, a fight. The Dominion preferred the sweet terror of surprise. The first hunt happened over a small human colony near the edge of their system. The night sky split open as the black ships appeared without a sound. No alarms rang. No warning came. One moment, there was life. The next, there was only silence. People vanished. Homes were left open, with food still warm on the table. Vehicles were found abandoned on roads, doors ajar. Thousands were taken alive, not killed, taken. The Carvax believed death was boring. Fear was so much better when it lasted. Back on Earth, people noticed something was wrong when ships stopped answering calls, when entire families disappeared without a trace of violence, when the space where colonies once thrived seemed eerily empty. Governments blamed accidents, pirates, equipment failure, anything but the truth, and all the while, the Carvax watched and waited, savoring the slow-building confusion. Then, they began the second hunt. This time, they made it public. Above Earth's moon, a massive alien vessel appeared, a shadow against the stars. It sent a signal on every human channel, hijacking every screen on the planet. The image was crystal clear. It showed a forest under a strange, red sky, and in that forest, humans were running, falling, crying. Carvax hunters chased them for sport, their movements sleek and predatory. The galaxy watched. Other species tuned in. Many turned away in shame. Some cheered quietly, glad it wasn't them. On Earth, people froze. Children cried. Soldiers stared at screens, their faces pale. World leaders demanded answers they didn't have. The broadcast ended with a simple symbol burned into the image. Prey confirmed. Panic spread faster than any invasion fleet. Markets collapsed. Cities filled with a cacophony of sirens and screams. Some people prayed. Some ran for the hills. Some simply denied it was real, a sick prank. But the Carvax weren't finished. They wanted to refine the fear, to make it personal. So they released some of the humans they had captured, sending them back to Earth. The returned humans were alive, but they were broken, silent. They didn't speak of pain at first. They spoke of games, of being chased through alien jungles, of being tagged with tracking devices, of hearing alien laughter whenever they fell. Doctors tried to help them. Psychologists asked questions. And the Carvax watched these interviews carefully, broadcasting them for their own amusement. They expected screaming, madness, a complete societal collapse. But something strange happened after the initial wave of terror faded. Many humans began asking different questions. How fast were the hunters? What weapons did they use? What were their tactics? What patterns did they follow? The Carvax noticed the change in human eyes. Fear was still there, a deep, primal fear. But behind it, something else was growing. Focus. The Dominion dismissed it. Prey always learned, but they always learned too late. It was part of the entertainment. The third hunt was larger, more audacious. Entire cities were targeted. Humans were snatched from parks, schools, and orbital stations. Some fought back with guns that did nothing against Carvax shields. Some charged in blind anger. None survived for long. But the galaxy noticed something new. The humans didn't beg. They cursed. They shouted threats. They promised retribution. The Carvax found this new defiance amusing. It added spice to the hunt. To increase the entertainment, they decided to make the next hunt deeply personal. A final broadcast was sent to every screen on Earth. This time, there was no chase. Just a single human child, standing in a metal cage, staring into the camera. The child was dirty, shaking, but silent. Round the cage, Carvex hunters prepared their sleek, cruel weapons, checking their systems. A message appeared on the screen, stark and simple: run, humanity. The Dominion expected tears, screams, surrender. They expected a planet to fall to its knees. Instead, something else happened. On Earth, as the child's face spread across every screen, people stopped running. The panicked screams died down. The streets went quiet. Soldiers in their bunkers lowered their weapons. Scientists in their labs stopped arguing. For the first time in its history, humanity was not divided. They were united. They were watching. Somewhere deep in humanity's military networks, dormant systems began waking up. Systems that had never been used. Old, theoretical war plans were pulled from dusty archives. Engineers and scientists stopped asking for permission and started collaborating. The Carvex, drunk on their power, did not notice the silence from Earth. They mistook it for the ultimate fear, the final stage of surrender. They released the child into the hunting grounds and turned their cameras on, ready to capture the grand finale. They did not know that humanity was recording everything too. Every movement, every weapon discharge, every tactical mistake the hunters made. Across Earth, a new emotion spread like wildfire. It wasn't hope. It wasn't courage. It was a cold, hard decision. Humanity had been given a role in the galaxy's cruel game, and they rejected it. The hunt had begun, but the hunters had just made a fatal mistake. They had chosen the wrong prey. Earth did not sleep. After the broadcast of the child, a chilling silence fell over the planet. The Carvex, our would-be hunters, expected panic. They anticipated chaos, societal collapse, the usual reaction of prey. But that's not what happened. Instead, something much colder, much more deliberate, took root. On the surface, cities hummed with their usual noise. But deep below, in reinforced bunkers, secret labs, and war rooms, humanity was not screaming. We were not begging. We were thinking. Military leaders from every continent convened. There was no time for blame. No energy wasted on pointing fingers. The past was irrelevant. The only question that mattered was a simple, terrifying one. How do you survive a predator that enjoys the chase? At first, the answer seemed impossible. Our weapons couldn't even scratch their hulls. Our ships were laughably slow, our shields paper-thin. Every single simulation, every war game, ended in our complete and utter annihilation. But humanity possesses a skill often underestimated by the galaxy. We adapt. Scientists, linguists, and strategists pored over every nanosecond of the alien broadcasts. They slowed the footage, replayed it, magnified it, searching for any detail. And they found it. The Carvex ships had blind spots. Their hunters, arrogant and theatrical, followed predictable patterns. Their movements were designed to inspire terror, not to fight an equal, and that was their first fatal mistake. A silent order went out across the fledgling human colonies on the fringes of our space. Evacuate. No distress signals, no broadcasts, just disappear. Ships were tucked away behind asteroids, submerged beneath the oceans of distant moons, hidden inside turbulent gas clouds. Old, forgotten satellites were reactivated, not to transmit, but to listen, to become our eyes and ears in the darkness. The Carvex noticed us scattering, and they smiled. From their perspective, this was textbook prey behavior. The herd was panicked, breaking apart before the final, glorious kill. They saw us running away. They were wrong. We weren't running. We were spreading out, like seeds on the wind. Back on Earth, a decision was made that sent shockwaves through the civilian population. There would be no rescue missions for the captured. No fleets sent on suicide runs to retrieve the taken. Not yet. Every ship saved was a piece on the board for the end game. Every life lost was a debt to be repaid. To break our spirit, the Carvex began returning some of their captives. They dropped them back on Earth, injured, emaciated, and terrified. They hoped these broken shells would spread despair. But something was different. These survivors weren't broken. They were witnesses. They spoke with a chilling clarity, describing the layout of Carvex weapons systems, repeating command words they had overheard, detailing how the hunters panicked when their perfect plans went awry. They were no longer victims. They were our first intelligence agents. Our engineers began to build strange new weapons, not powerful ones, not elegant ones. They built unstable, cheap, and unpredictable devices, weapons meant to break the rules of physics, not follow them. Gravity traps that would momentarily warp space, signal jammers that broadcast pure chaos. Engines pushed so far beyond safety limits, they were essentially guided bombs. Our soldiers started training differently, too. The goal was no longer to win a battle, it was to survive contact, to gather data, and if necessary, to die buying a few precious seconds for others. The very concept of victory was erased and replaced with a single, grim objective: persistence. The Carvex Council noticed the shift. Human space had gone quiet, too quiet. A few of the younger, more cautious commanders raised alarms. Prey that stops screaming, they warned, is often learning to bite. But the older, more decorated hunters laughed them down. Fear freezes, they declared. Silence means surrender, to assert their undisputed dominance and put on a show for the rest of an awestruck galaxy. The Dominion planned the Grand Hunt, a direct assault on Earth itself. The goal wasn't destruction, it was humiliation. A massive fleet, the largest ever assembled, gathered at the edge of our solar system. Hunters sharpened their ceremonial blades, tested their plasma cannons, and prepared the live feeds that would broadcast our demise across the galaxy. This was to be their masterpiece. On Earth, we watched them approach. There were no last-minute evacuation orders, no defiant speeches from world leaders. Instead, something happened that no one expected. Our ships moved forward to meet them. They were a motley fleet, small, ugly, asymmetrical craft, some looking like they were barely held together with prayers and duct tape. There were no matching designs, no proud, orderly formations. Across the galaxy, those watching the broadcast mocked us. On the bridge of the Carvex flagship, the hunters laughed openly. The first contact was brutal and short. Our ships surged forward and were instantly vaporized. Some were torn apart by alien firepower, others simply self-destructed, their unstable engines detonating near the Carvex shields. The damage we inflicted was negligible, almost pathetic, but the data we gathered was priceless. Human commanders watched in real time as alien shield frequencies fluctuated, as weapon systems cycled through recharge delays, as panicked, encrypted signals flashed between their ships. Then, just as quickly as we had appeared, our remaining ships retreated. The Carvex didn't bother to chase. Why would they? The message, they believed, was clear. Humanity was terrified. And this pathetic display was our final act of desperation. But on Earth, the mood was not one of despair. For the first time, we had engaged the enemy and survived. For the first time, one of their ships showed a flicker of damage on our sensors. Hope didn't spread through the command bunkers. Something harder did. Confidence. In hidden facilities, our scientists made a terrifying pivot. They stopped designing weapons to destroy ships. They started designing weapons to destroy the hunters inside them. Life support viruses that would turn a ship's air supply into acid. Neural disruptors that could be broadcast at close range to overwhelm their senses. AI ghosts that could infect alien computer systems and scream false commands, turning their own technology against them. These were not tools of war. They were instruments of punishment. The galaxy remained oblivious. The Carvex, blinded by their own arrogance, didn't care. They fueled their ships and prepped their armies for the final hunt. They believed Earth would fall screaming, just like all the others. They never understood that we had stopped seeing ourselves as prey. We had started seeing ourselves as a problem that needed to be solved. And problems, once solved, tend to stay that way. The hunters were coming, and humanity was finally ready to make its choice. The Carvex fleet sliced through the void. Their rival in the human system, a declaration of dominance. They were the apex predators of the galaxy, and this was just another hunt. They didn't rush. True hunters never do. Their colossal ships fanned out, forming a perfect, inescapable net around the pale blue dot they called Earth. Smaller, faster hunter vessels surged ahead, their sensors hungry for the scent of fear, for the panicked chatter of a species trying to flee. But there was nothing, only a profound, unnerving silence. No desperate distress calls crackled across the void. No frantic evacuation ships scrambled from orbital docks. The cities below glowed with a strange, almost peaceful light. This stillness was unnatural. It unsettled the younger hunters. Prey was supposed to run. Prey was supposed to scream. The elder commanders, seasoned by 1,000 such conquests, simply scoffed. Humans hide, they declared with unwavering confidence. Hiding is a confession of weakness. The order was given. Hunting parties descended like divine judgment. Their targets pre-selected, sprawling cities, vital power grids, fragile space stations. And that's when the hunt changed. That's when space itself began to twist. Satellites, long dismissed by human engineers as obsolete junk, flickered back to life. They didn't fire weapons. They did something far more clever. They began to reflect and amplify the Carvex's own scanning signals, flooding their sensors with a storm of phantom readings. Ghostly fleets appeared on their screens. Targets multiplied, then vanished into nothingness. The hunters, frustrated but still arrogant, adjusted their sensors to filter the noise. That was their first mistake. As they recalibrated, tiny probes, no larger than space debris, drifted silently into the heart of their formations. They carried no warheads, no shields. They carried only questions. They were ears and eyes, listening to the Carvex network chatter, learning their protocols, their command structures, their very language. They drank in every byte of data before silently burning up in the ether, their precious cargo already transmitted back to Earth. Then, the first trap snapped shut. Near the orbit of Mars, a Carvex scouting wing suddenly found their engines sputtering. An invisible force seized them. The fabric of spacetime itself was bending, contorting around them, pulling them toward an unseen center. Human gravity mines, a technology the Carvex had deemed impossible, had been activated. 3 of the sleek alien vessels were crushed like cans, their hulls screaming as they imploded under the impossible strain. The rest of the squadron managed to break free, their ships scarred, their crews shaken. The Carvex were enraged. How dare the prey fight back? They lashed out, firing their massive weapons into the empty space where the trap had been. A futile display of fury. On Earth, there was no celebration. In darkened command bunkers, human strategists watched the data pour in. They had confirmed what they needed to know. The hunters could feel fear. Their ships broadcasted panicked, high-frequency signals when surprised. And if they could feel fear, they could be hunted. Humanity's fleets finally began to move, but not as one grand armada. They moved like ghosts. Small, agile squadrons hit and vanished into the darkness. They bled the Carvex fleet, striking fuel carriers, blinding sensor rays, and assassinating lone command ships. They never stayed to fight a battle they couldn't win. Human ships were lost, many of them, but every loss was a purchase. Every destroyed vessel bought priceless intelligence on Carvex tactics, response times, and vulnerabilities. The hunters were losing control. Their perfect, galaxy-spanning formation began to tighten, a sign of anxiety. Orders from their commanders grew harsher, punishments swifter for any captain who showed hesitation. Fear, like a slow poison, was seeping into the fleet's veins. To reassert their dominance, to crush this unexpected defiance, the Carvex Dominion authorized the Skyfall event. In unison, their warships turned their primary weapons on Earth itself. They set the atmosphere on fire, cities burned, continents went dark. The message was brutal and clear: come out and surrender, or watch your world die. For a heart-stopping moment, humanity wavered. The cost was unimaginable. But then, something the Carvex could never have predicted happened. Earth remained silent. No surrender was offered. No final, desperate counterattack was launched. No signals at all. The Carvex watched in utter confusion as fires raged across the planet. Yet the pattern of human resistance didn't change. They couldn't comprehend that Earth was no longer the sole bastion of human survival. It was now just bait. While the hunters were distracted, human fleets struck again. This time, they didn't hit the fringes. They went for the throat. A crude but ferociously aggressive human AI, a digital phantom, reached the Carvex's central command relay. It didn't just listen. It screamed. False orders, laced with terror, flooded the alien network. Retreat. Enemy on board. Friendly fire authorized. Chaos erupted. For a few critical moments, Carvex ships turned on each other in a frenzy of paranoia and confusion. And moments were all humanity needed. Human bombers, cloaked and waiting, surged from the darkness. They didn't carry explosives. They released clouds of neural disruptors. Across the fleet, Carvex hunters collapsed at their stations, their minds torn apart by psychic feedback, screaming inside their own skulls. Life support systems flickered and failed at random. The Carvex fought back with savage ferocity, destroying many human ships. But they couldn't stop the tide of chaos. They had lost the initiative. They had lost the hunt. And the galaxy was watching. Never before had prey so thoroughly outwitted the hunters. On 100 worlds, other species began recording, whispering, and learning from humanity's example. A panicked message, laced with a fear no Carvex had ever admitted, reached the far-off Dominion Council. The fleet commander's words were stark. Humans do not flee. They study. They adapt. They are not prey. The order from the council was unprecedented, unheard of. Full withdrawal. Hunters do not retreat. But retreat they did. Their once proud fleet turned and ran, limping out of the system. Human ships followed, always at a distance, never engaging fully, always watching, always learning. The Carvex believed they had escaped a hunt that went horribly wrong. They were mistaken. They had just walked into the center of a much larger and far more terrifying design. The trap wasn't meant to destroy their fleet. It was meant to teach the galaxy a lesson. On the scarred surface of Earth, survivors looked up at burning skies and silent command centers. Billions had been lost, but something profound had been gained. Proof that hunters could bleed. Proof that fear was a weapon that cut both ways. Proof that the galaxy's oldest rule that the strong hunt the weak was about to be broken. Deep beneath the rubble of what was once London, a final, chilling order was given. Not for revenge, not for defense. The order was simple: erasure. The trap of the weak had closed, and the hunters who had just fled had absolutely no idea what they had just unleashed upon the galaxy. The galaxy expected humans to rebuild. That was what prey always did after a failed hunt. They cried, repaired their worlds, and waited for the hunters to return, stronger than before. But humans did not rebuild, not first. They prepared. Earth was wounded. Cities lay in ash, oceans burned with the wreckage of fallen fleets. Billions were dead or missing. Yet, no monuments were built. No days of mourning were declared. Grief was a luxury, a privilege for peacetime. Human leaders understood something the galaxy did not. Pain could wait. Survival could. Not deep beneath mountains and oceans. Human factories woke fully for the first time. These were not defense factories, not shipyards meant to protect borders. These were factories designed to remove threats permanently. Human scientists stopped asking if weapons were legal or moral. Those questions belonged to a time of peace, and peace no longer existed. Every survivor remembered the cages, the hunts, the laughter of their tormentors. Mercy was finished. Human fleets left Earth in silence. No grand speeches, no dramatic warnings. They did not move as a unified army, but as shadows, small groups, taking different paths, with no discernible pattern. Their target wasn't the Carvex capital, not yet. First, humans hunted the hunters. Carvex outposts vanished from star charts. Supply worlds went dark. Breeding moons, vital to the Carvex war machine, mysteriously lost their orbits and shattered against their parent planets. Hunting arenas, once filled with cheering crowds watching brutal spectacles, became silent. Empty rock. No message was sent, no claim of responsibility. Just a spreading void where Dominion presence used to be. The Carvex Dominion noticed, but far too late. Commanders reported missing ships, lost signals, entire systems gone dead. They demanded answers from the Galactic Council, the governing body that had allowed the hunts. The Council argued. They dismissed the reports, believing it was a bluff. How could a wounded prey species strike so deep into the heart of Dominion space? Then, a Carvex archive world went silent. Not destroyed, silent. When a scouting fleet finally arrived, they found every living being frozen in place. Their neural systems were burned out, their eyes wide open, their bodies perfectly intact. It was a terrifying, living monument to a new kind of warfare, and carved into the surface of the planet, visible from orbit, was a human symbol. It wasn't a threat, it was a warning. The Council finally understood. They spoke to humanity. Their message careful, respectful, afraid. This hunt has gone too far. They broadcast, we will release all prisoners. We will leave your space. The message was sent to every human world, every colony, every ship. Humanity's answer was silence, absolute, deafening silence. Their fleets continued moving, a relentless tide of vengeance. They meticulously bypassed civilian populations of other species. They avoided neutral systems. They focused only on the Carvex Dominion, and that surgical precision scared the galaxy more than open rage ever could. Other species began to distance themselves. Treaties were cancelled. Trade routes were closed. No one wanted to be standing near a dying predator when the true hunters arrived. The Dominion scrambled to defend itself. They reorganized their fleets, built stronger ships, and set elaborate traps. Humans ignored most of them. Instead, they attacked the very idea of the Dominion. They infiltrated networks and destroyed the records of their great hunts. They erased the legacies of their most celebrated hunters. They broadcast the screams of captured Carvex raiders back to their home systems, with a simple, chilling message looped over and over. This is how you taught us? Panic set in among the Carvex. They were hunters, not warriors. They were not used to being the ones chased, the ones afraid of the dark. Human weapons evolved faster than anyone thought possible. New experimental engines burned their own crews, but crossed entire systems in impossible time. Self-learning AI weapons analyzed each battle, rewriting their own code to become more lethal with every engagement. Humans accepted losses. The Dominion couldn't comprehend it. For humanity, every death sharpened their attack, fueled their resolve. For the Dominion, every loss was a crack in their facade of invincibility. When the first Carvex world burned, the galaxy held its breath, not because of the destruction, but because humans didn't stop to celebrate. They simply moved on to the next world. And then the Council, in a final act of desperation, ordered total war. Everything the Dominion had was thrown at humanity. It was a spectacular, futile gesture. Human fleets didn't meet them head-on in glorious battle. They poisoned fuel supplies. They broke communication chains. They turned the Dominion's own allies against them by revealing ancient deceptions and forgotten hunts. The hunters now stood alone, in the ruins of a destroyed Carvex command ship. A search party found a message. It wasn't broadcast. It was carved by hand into a bulkhead. You mistook mercy for weakness. The galaxy finally understood. This wasn't revenge. This was a cleanup. The Dominion's final defensive line formed around their capital world, Carva Prime. Thousands of their most powerful ships, planetary shields glowing with defiance, star-killing weapons charged and waiting, and outside the system, human fleets gathered. They hung in the black, a silent, patient storm. For the first time since their crusade began, humans hesitated, not out of fear, but out of choice. They knew that ending the Dominion would change the galaxy forever, creating a power vacuum that could lead to even greater chaos. A decision had to be made. The human commanders gave the final order: proceed. As the human fleets began their advance, the stars themselves seemed to dim. On Carva Prime, the hunters prepared for their last stand, ready to fight to the bitter end. They did not know that for humanity, the end had already happened. Mercy had already been given, and it had been refused. The Carvex capital system, a name that once whispered fear across the galaxy. Its star burned at the heart of a web of destruction, massive shipyards, fortress moons, and weapon platforms older than entire civilizations. For eons, every hunter in the Dominion, every predator species that prowled the star lanes, believed this system was unbreakable, an eternal monument to their power. Now, it just waited. At the system's edge, the human fleets gathered. They were silent, still, not information, not flying banners or broadcasting declarations, just dark, silent shapes against the cold light of distant stars. The entire galaxy was watching. On thousands of worlds, civilizations turned their most powerful sensors toward this single point in space. They waited for the grandstanding, the threats, the final, dramatic warning. But the humans gave them none. There was only silence. The Carvex, impatient and arrogant, fired first. Weapons platforms on their fortress moons unleashed hell. Planetary defense cannons tore through the void, their energy beams bright enough to blind unprotected sensors. In the first few seconds, dozens of human ships simply vanished, consumed by overwhelming fire. But the human fleet did not slow down. They didn't falter. They just kept coming, an inexorable tide of dark metal. On Carvex command decks, voices grew sharp with panic. Commanders shouted orders, their confidence cracking. The humans were ignoring the strongest, most obvious defensive choke points. They were slipping through gaps in the firing arcs that no sane tactician would ever attempt. Gaps no one believed were even real. Some ships were torn apart mid-flight, their hulls peeling away under the barrage. Others didn't even try to fight back. They simply accelerated, crashing directly into enemy platforms and detonating in silent, brilliant flashes of white fire. Every single human loss was a sacrifice, a key that unlocked a new path for the ships behind them. Then, as the Carvex defenses began to strain, the humans revealed their final, terrible tools. Near the system's sun, something ignited, not a weapon, but a device that warped space itself. Artificial gravity projectors flared to life, and suddenly, the star screamed. Its surface, once a stable ball of fusion, twisted and convulsed. Colossal solar storms, larger than planets, erupted and slammed into the Carvex defenses with the force of 1,000 fleets. Shields overloaded and failed. Power grids across the system collapsed. Carvex warships, their systems fried, began to fall out of orbit like broken insects, tumbling helplessly into the planets they were meant to protect. The Carvex commanders, desperate, tried to regroup their remaining forces. It was useless. Human AIs, ghosts in their machines, flooded their networks with a storm of false data. Contradictory commands overlapped. Fleets received orders to attack phantom human armadas, turning on each other in the chaos. Automated weapon systems, now compromised, fired blindly at friendly targets. For the first time in their long, brutal history, the Carvex, the ultimate hunters, felt true, abject helplessness. From the capital world, a single, desperate signal broadcast into the void: surrender. An unconditional plea for cessation of hostilities. The galaxy, watching in stunned horror, held its breath. They expected the humans to pause, to show mercy, to begin negotiations for the spoils of war. The human fleets ignored the signal. They didn't even acknowledge it. The watching galaxy trembled. But the humans didn't destroy the planet, not yet. Their tactics shifted into something colder, more patient. The fleet formed a perfect sphere round the capital world, a cage of silent warships. They shut down the skies. No ship could enter. No signal could escape. The planet was left alive, a prisoner in its own system, forced to watch as human ships methodically dismantled its remaining orbital defenses one by one. On the surface, Karvax civilians looked up and saw the sky filled with the dark, hanging shapes of human ships. They hovered like shadows of judgment. No bombs fell. No lasers struck the cities. The silence was infinitely worse than the storm had been. Then, a single human transmission reached the surface. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry or triumphant. The voice was calm, measured, and devoid of emotion. "You hunted us for sport. You taught us fear. Now you will learn consequence." The message ended, and the planet began to die from within. Deep beneath the planet's crust, hidden devices activated, not weapons of fire and fusion, but of pressure and time. Tectonic plates, forced by unimaginable energies, began to shift. The ground itself buckled. Entire cities cracked and fell into ruin. Oceans, displaced from their beds, rose in colossal tsunamis, swallowing coastlines whole. Continents groaned and tore apart. Still, the humans did not deliver a final, killing blow. They wanted the lesson to be remembered. They wanted the galaxy to see. The final strike came from the system's own star. The human gravity anchors, their work done, released their hold at once. The star, recoiling from the artificial forces, pulsed violently. A wave of pure heat and light, a final, cleansing fire, washed over the entire system. The Karvax capital world's atmosphere was stripped away and ignited in an instant. Surface cities, already broken, melted into seas of glowing glass. All life ended in a silent, searing flash. The Karvax dominion was finished. The human fleets did not cheer. They did not claim the territory or scavenge the ruins. They simply turned, as silent as they had arrived, and left the dead system behind as the galaxy watched in shocked silence. The aftermath spread faster than light. Across the star charts, reactions were varied. Some civilizations, long terrorized by the Karvax, celebrated in quiet, secret relief. Others, seeing what humanity had become, now feared them far more than they had ever feared the Dominion. And many predator species began frantically erasing all records of their own past hunts, especially any involving a species from a small, blue world called Earth. One truth had been seared into the galactic consciousness. The balance of power had irrevocably changed. Humanity's fleets returned home, but not to victory parades. Earth was still broken, its cities still bearing the scars of the hunt. Countless colony worlds were still healing from the wounds inflicted by the Karvax. Humanity had won, but the victory tasted like ash. It wasn't something to be celebrated. It was something to be remembered, a grim necessity etched into their soul. Years later, scavengers picking through the glassy ruins of the Karvax system found one final message left behind. It was a simple beacon, not in any human language, but translated into dozens of galactic tongues, displayed for any to see. It read, "Hunting ends here." And the galaxy listened. Borders shifted overnight. Predator species rewrote their ancient laws, dismantling their own traditions of the hunt out of sheer, primal fear. Humanity didn't need to enforce this new peace. They didn't need to build an empire. They simply had to exist. Their presence was now a deterrent more powerful than any weapon, because every species, from the smallest scavenger to the mightiest warrior race, now understood one simple, terrifying thing. Humans do not seek war. They do not desire control. But if you choose them as your prey, they will choose your annihilation. Time passed. The galaxy tried to pretend the war had been a nightmare. Records were edited. Stories were softened. Some species claimed the Karvax had fallen because they were careless, not because humans were different. Humans did not correct them. They simply returned home. Earth was no longer the shining world it once was. Vast regions were empty, silent witnesses to the conflict. Cities existed as ruins and memories, their skeletal remains reaching for a sky that no longer held enemy ships. The survivors rebuilt slowly, carefully, without pride. There was no grand celebration, no victory parade through the galactic core. Humanity did not rise as rulers, they rose as watchers. The fleets that had shattered the Karvax dominion were broken apart. The very ships that had saved the galaxy were systematically scrapped, their components recycled into tools for rebuilding. The weapons that had ended a species were sealed deep underground, buried in vaults of silence and regret. Humanity had learned something profound in the fires of war. Power did not need to be shown to be real. Its mere existence was enough. Across the galaxy, a quiet, almost imperceptible change began to spread. Predator species, who had once terrorized weaker worlds for sport or resources, suddenly stopped their hunts. The sprawling, brutal slave markets that had been a stain on galactic civilization vanished overnight. Entire cultures, built on conquest and domination, frantically rewrote their histories to hide past crimes. This wasn't because humans demanded it. It was because no one, absolutely no one, wanted to test them. No one wanted to see if the stories were true. Years later, human explorers returned to the star lanes. They moved slowly, their ships designed for science and trade, not war. They avoided conflict, preferring diplomacy over shows of force. When they met other species, they spoke calmly and traded fairly. They made no threats. They offered no grand pronouncements, but they did not forget, and their presence was a constant, unspoken reminder. On distant worlds, children learned new lessons in their schools. The stories weren't about the mighty Carvex Empire, they were about humans. They look soft, the teachers would say. They are divided, the texts would read, but they are dangerous when pushed. These warnings became a new kind of galactic folklore, whispered in the dimly lit corners of spaceports and debated in the hallowed halls of interstellar councils. Do not hunt humans. Do not cage them. Do not make them decide what they must become to survive. A long, long time after the war, a joint scientific expedition from several species visited the ruins of the Carvex capital system. The star, once tormented by planet-shattering energies, had stabilized, but the system around it was dead. Glassed worlds floated in an eternal, silent twilight. The shattered hulls of warships drifted like the bones of ancient leviathans. It was a graveyard the size of a solar system. But at the very center of this desolation, they found something unexpected. A monument. It wasn't built by the Carvex. It was built by humans. It was impossibly simple. A smooth, black monolith floating in the void. There were no images of weapons, no statues of victorious soldiers. There was only text, carved into its surface and translated into every known language of the galaxy. The words were chilling. Here ended a species that chose cruelty over survival. Nothing more. No human symbols, no signatures, just a statement of fact. The expedition reported its find, and the galaxy reacted with a fresh wave of fear, respect, and deep confusion. Why would the victors build a monument for their defeated enemy, an enemy that had tried to wipe them out? The question puzzled philosophers and leaders for years. The answer finally came from a human historian, speaking quietly before a council of many different species. Her voice carried no pride, only a weary sadness. We did not build it for them, she said, her gaze sweeping across the assembled aliens. We built it for ourselves, to remember what we become when we are hunted. And in that moment, the galaxy understood. Humans weren't proud of what they had done. They were terrified of it. They were careful, so very careful not to let it happen again. On Earth, children grew up under open skies once more. They played among the new cities that rose from the old ashes. They learned the stories of the Great War, but not as heroic legends. They were taught them as warnings. They were taught kindness first, curiosity second, strength last. But above all else, they were taught one unbreakable rule: never let anyone make you pray. Humanity slowly rediscovered its soul. Art, music, and exploration flourished again. Their ships traveled far, not as conquerors, but as observers, as gardeners in the vast wilderness of space. When they found worlds struggling against famine or natural disaster, they helped, quietly, and without expecting reward. And when they found worlds ruled by cruelty and oppression, they watched closely. The galaxy learned to live with humans, not above them, not below them, but beside them, and always, carefully. In the far reaches of space, a young, ambitious species once considered raiding a nearby human colony. Their leaders, before launching their attack, decided to study the old records, the fragmented data from the Carvex War, the reports of the monument. They chose to open trade negotiations instead. That single decision saved their entire civilization. Long after the last Carvex relic had crumbled to dust, the lesson remained, carved into the collective memory of the galaxy. Humans are not monsters. Humans are not saviors. They are simply human. But if you treat them as prey, they will become the end. And so, the galaxy endured, Because one species learned too late, and everyone else learned just in time. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more content like this. Let me know in the comments what you thought of humanity's response. Until next time, stay curious.